This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 2nd of April 2024 at home in Wicklow. And it is episode 150. So it should be a special episode, but it's not really. And maybe it should be an episode that epitomizes or encapsulates everything that this podcast is meant to be about. But it's not that either. No, I've decided in my infinite wisdom to dedicate this episode to the legendary, the phenomenal Tom Cruise, of all people. That's just what came along, that track in my mind, and I thought, yeah, why not? So if you're a fan of Tom Cruise, you'll hopefully enjoy this episode. If you are a fan of films, you should enjoy this episode. If you're a fan of neither of those things, you will hardly be listening to this right now. So that's what's coming up. I have a couple of different takes, if you like, on what makes Cruise America's boy. And I have also a theory, not a theory, a hypothesis. Is that the same as a theory? I wonder if there were acting Olympics, who would represent which country. So there's that as well. Anyway, there's that and there's other things. So keep listening, and I will see you around the corner for a whole lot of Tom. Cheers, see you then.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my moji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining me. So, what's up? What's going on today? I'll tell you what's going on today. It's the Cruise-a-thon. We're going in cruise control. We're going to cruise through the career of Tom Cruise. So if you don't like Tom Cruise, get the hell out of here. That's what's happening. And this is really coming on the back of rewatching Top Gun Maverick, which obviously was a huge success upon its release 2 summers ago, having been held for release during the pandemic. I think it was filmed in 2019, and then didn't get released until it was safe to go back in the cinemas, back in the theaters. Safe to go back in the water. And yeah, it was huge. It was a huge movie. I saw it twice in the cinema. I went once with my brother, Danny, and I went once with Kiara, my wife. Kiara's got a real... She doesn't watch a lot of movies anymore. She's, really just feels she doesn't have the energy levels to sit through a movie. So she reads much more. I'm quite envious of that. But it doesn't stop me watching movies, and most often choosing movies over books. But she has a soft spot for certain 80s, 80s icons, if you like. She has a soft spot for Sylvester Stallone. And she didn't need that much encouraging to come to the cinema to watch Top Gun Maverick. But yeah, we watched it at the weekend because we were looking for a family movie, and I just thought, well, there's nothing too gratuitous, sexually speaking or violence speaking in Top Gun Maverick, and it would be suitable for our daughter to watch. And so we watched it on Friday night. I have a little projector. We put it up on the wall, and yeah, it was a great entertainment again. And it just got me thinking about Tom Cruise and his sort of, well, yeah, his iconography, his persona, his talent, some of the tales from his private life, and what he seems to represent culturally to American audiences in particular, of course, being an all-American boy. I think that's central to his ongoing appeal. But I just found myself thinking about what it is exactly that makes him such a big draw at the cinema still. Because basically what he, we're talking about a 40-year career from his earliest movies. Like his real breakout year was 1983. And I think the three movies that came out in 1983 were The Outsiders, Risky Business, and All the Right Moves. I think I've got that right. And like Risky Business was the one, which was like, okay, we have a live one. There's someone here to stay. And I mean, I'll go into it in due course. But like in a way, the character he played in The Outsiders, which was probably the definitive Brat Pack movie, the young, hunky, spunky male actors of the early 80s. It was a very deep bench in that movie. But Tom Cruise's part, he was part of the ensemble. Well, he wasn't that central. He was like one of the the guys you're sort of meant to be rooting for as they're presented in that movie. But in a way, he could have been played by anyone. And in fact, if you are familiar with the lore of that particular movie and Francis Ford Coppola's audition process, like he just basically had all the hot young talent in Hollywood come in and just do these sort of role swapping auditions where he just kind of call out 3 or 4 names and get them all to read a scene and then go, okay, next I'll try these guys. So there's probably no one that you could mention from that era. If you think of young actors of the time, there's probably no one you can think of that wasn't in that room at some point auditioning with or against the other actors who eventually got cast. And so in that regard, in that regard, the role that Tom Cruise played, that character could have bbeen played by anyone, because it wasn't really central to the plot or to the narrative. As an aside, I mean, I loved The Outsiders when I first saw it, which I must have been. I could have been anything from 11, 12, maybe, yeah, around then. And it had a huge impact on me in terms of its presentation of a very sort of bruised and sensitive young masculinity. Cool kids, cool male characters who are put upon by society and by circumstances, but who ached with emotional need and yearning, and just great chemistry in that movie. Great chemistry between the actors. C. Thomas Howell was really the character with whom we were meant to identify most. He was sort of our avatar in that world, and Rob Lowe was a brother in the movie, and then Patrick Swayze. And it was funny, there was like 2 older guys, and it was kind of a little class warfare movie. Kids from the wrong side of the tracks who we're invited to identify with. And of course, it was an adaptation of the S.E. Hinton, kind of young adult novel of the same name. And so it's kids from the wrong side of the tracks, and then their sort of skirmishes and rivalry and hatred of the more kind of preppy, well-to-do kids from the other side of the tracks. And Patrick Swayze was the older brother. Older, bigger, more mature, and he, in a way, was one of the sort of one of the role models for the younger guys in the movie. Like, he was someone that they all respected and were somewhat afraid of because he could kick their asses. And he was pitched against, in terms of, the another path to go down, Matt Dillon's character, who had sort of, he strayed from the path and, was kind of involved in, petty crime and had access to a gun and was definitely, more dangerous. And they were both very cool guys, but Patrick Swayze was kind of the stand-up guy and was kind of following the more honourable path and, rising above his circumstances. And he had the respect of the kind of the alpha from the other kind of gang, the well-to-do kids. And that was very striking to me as a boy watching it. I was going, okay, that's a possible model there. You can be tough, but you can have respect, and you can kind of conduct yourself in such a way as your own crew respect you, but the opposition respects you as well. And I kind of, I had an instinct that, okay, well, I'm never going to be Matt Dillon. And of course, I was never going to be Patrick Swayze either, but it was more his character. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to emulate his look. But Matt Dillon had that kind of effortless cool, and he had the effortless cool and the kind of the bad boy thing as well. And I was like, well, okay, that's definitely not my path. I was too fearful and too much of a leaning towards being good. Anyway, that's a massive aside when I'm meant to be talking about Tom Cruise. One of the most striking things, and I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, one of the most striking things about Tom Cruise in The Outsiders is that he has the energy. He has that Tom Cruise energy, but he doesn't yet have the teeth or the smile. Or the teeth were deliberately maybe kind of mucked up for the character. But, he doesn't quite look like himself. But yeah. So those movies, like The Outsiders was okay, like he was there. And like these are all the young guys to watch. Emilio Estevez was in that as well, Ralph Macchio, others. But then he had his kind of his high school football star movie, All the Right Moves, which I think I remember seeing that on TV, and I think quite generic. I've never revisited it, and I would have seen it at some point in the mid-'80s on TV. Risky Business, though. Risky Business was the real sort of explosion, the real announcement. And Tom Cruise dancing around his house in, wearing Ray-Bans. Wearing Wayfarers and his tidy whities, his jocks, his underwear. Like this, that's an iconic moment and an iconic image from American movies, and the sort of announcement of a talent and a male sex symbol. And Risky Business is a good movie which stands up very, very well, and a kind of an exploration of the American dream and capitalism and pursuing the dollars and also pursuing sex, and what one is willing to do and what it costs. So a movie that stands up very well, and also notable for an early acting role for Joe Pantoliano, as a sort of quite a nasty piece of work. But in any case, look, sorry, I'm not going to sit here and go through movie by movie. I think what's interesting about Tom Cruise is how in certain roles and in a certain, almost like his default screen persona, which is fundamentally the ultra confident born winner. I mean, like, that's it. Like, that's who he has come back to time and time again. And there's something about that I think American audiences love to believe is a reflection of who they are. Born to win. And at a time when arguably America, like the USA, is very much not what it was 40 years ago, is very much not what it was for most of the most of the 20th century, where the sort of the world order has changed, and there's been a power shift, and clearly politically America is a country riven by division, by political division, and by ideological division, and all kinds of, social and cultural tensions, whether they're tethered to race or whether they're tethered to economic position or economic capability. The USA is not a happy camp, and there is no unified belief or unified buy-in to what America can be or should be. I think it's interesting that when that is happening, a movie like Top Gun Maverick comes along and scores really, really big, because similar to the original Top Gun from 1986, there is a sort of American triumphalism, an American jingoism, an American military idealism that is very much part of the package. So when I said at the start that there's nothing gratuitous about the movie, that's somewhat disingenuous. I mean, nothing gratuitous in terms of sexual content or violence, gore. But if you're sensitive to, American military propaganda and the sort of sanitization of the American war machine, the American military-industrial complex, if you're sensitive to that being packaged and presented as something very, almost kind of, innocent and fun, like good, clean, wholesome fun, and just putting it into a lovely cauldron of Americana, with beautiful Midwestern vistas and and apple pie, cowboy boots and Ford Mustangs. Throw Top Gun in the mix and go, this is who we are. We're just straight shooters. we're really honourable, good people. We're good guys, and we get the job done. That's a huge part of what's been presented to you, and it's part of sort of American exceptionalism. This idea that every country has a sense of its own exceptionalism in some way, and the American exceptionalism has been really built on might is right, and when that is called into question, when that can no longer be asserted with true confidence, cultural fractures come. And it's the same I believe it's the same in England. I hesitate to say the United Kingdom because that there's an implication that Welsh people and Scottish people feel the same way as English people, and I just don't think that's the case. But if you want to talk about the UK as an institution that is a product of English culture and the English mindset, and of course a product of the history of empire and colonialism, England culturally again is a place that has been riven by the collapse of confidence and riven by this crisis of the end of empire, which has resulted in an extremely regressive, overly nostalgic Tory government, governing with just this kind of blinkered retrograde attitude to the 21st century, believing they can just reproduce the empire of old in good old Blighty, and it's just it just hasn't washed. And I think there's something, there's a parallel there with the American empire and what they've had to deal with, and so I think a cultural response to that is to crave reassurance, and to crave some symbol or emblem of that exceptionalism to placate the fears. And if it's not reassurance, it's escapism. And I think when Tom Cruise turns up in Top Gun Maverick, that's what's going on. That's what's going down. And he grins his Tom Cruise grin, and he grits his Tom Cruise teeth, and he holds back the emotion stoically as he soldiers on, or in this case pilots on, and people respond. And I think American audiences respond particularly in a very particular way to that, because they're going to tell themselves that's who we are. And I'm like, be careful. Be careful. Don't ever look at movie stars and go, that's who we are, that's us, because it's not real. It's not real. But Tom Cruise has been so unbelievably successful throughout his career, and has managed to just re-energize that persona and reproduce it and recommodify it again and again and again, and somehow remains vital in that particular role. And I don't think there's anybody else like him. And I was sort of entertaining myself, thinking, if there was an acting Olympics, a huge international competition where you could send one actor to represent your country in the acting Olympics, who would you send? Because people wouldn't speak about Tom Cruise in the same breath as De Niro or Pacino, and yet he's had a much better career, arguably. He's not an actor of their caliber, although I rate Cruise very highly as an actor. I think he's been excellent in many films, but if it's the Olympics, it's not just about talent. I mean, it is about the brand, it is about the image, it is about the cultural representation. Now you might go, well, who would Ireland send? Now, my instinct is somebody like like Brendan Gleeson. And you think, well, maybe, why not Colin Farrell? Because Colin Farrell went head to head with Tom Cruise in Minority Report, which I remember at the time, and I have commented on this before, being like, oh my God, there's an Irish actor not taking a backward step against, the juggernaut that is Tom Cruise. And Colin Farrell it can be a charisma machine himself, just like Tom Cruise. And yet, if you're talking about the Olympics and representing a culture and being someone that we think, yeah, that's who we are, maybe Brendan Gleeson's a better choice. Because I think there's something about how Brendan Gleeson conducts himself as a person, in his interviews, his public persona, and as well as, largely, the very consistent quality of his work through, across his career. There's something about him that I think Irish people really respond to and go, yeah, that's our guy. And, it's not that we don't think Colin Farrell is our guy. And I mean, it's not for me to speak for all Irish people. This is just my own hunch, my own gut feeling. Irish people, we have a real soft spot for our sons and daughters who've done well. And certainly, like last year's outpouring of grief for Sinead O'Connor and Shane McGowan, is testament to that. And Christy Dignam as well earlier in the year. And Colin Farrell, people will be very aware of his own kind of journey, his own career, his own recovery from the trials and temptations of addiction, whether it was drink or drugs or everything. He's come a long way on that road, and I think has been doing really interesting work in the last 10 years or so, particularly. But the Irish, to be the representative in the acting Olympics, I'm not sure if Colin would be the man. That kind of maturity of Gleeson, I don't know. There's something else there, isn't there? Is it just age? Is it just experience? Is it? I don't know. Is there something more formidable about Brendan Gleeson? Maybe that's it. That'd be an interesting poll, wouldn't it? Because you could kind of go, yeah, but hold on. What about Michael Fassbender? Now, Michael Fassbender, of course, has the German in him as well. What about one of our actresses? What about Saoirse Ronan? Coming from the younger side of things. Although I keep coming across Irish people who don't seem to have that much love for Saoirse Ronan. I can't quite work that out. I think she's fantastic. So many different actors I could name, but that would be my choice. Who would the French send? Would they send Gerard Depardieu? He's fallen from grace, though, hasn't he? I think he's gone a bit mad. Another one of these actors, I think I've put this theory out there before, the talent that eats itself. Brando and Depardieu definitely come to mind. Francis Ford Coppola had his phase as well, didn't he, of eating. I don't know if the French would dig out the corpse of Jean-Paul Belmondo, or maybe Alain Delon. Hard to know. That's a good question, though. It's a good question. Like you cast your mind around and think, well, who would represent us? Would the Germans choose Bruno Ganz if they could? Would they choose Sandra Hüller? Maybe. It's a good question, but the premise really is that my belief is that the Americans would choose Tom Cruise. I don't think they'd choose I don't know who, Chris Hemsworth, for example. He's Australian, so that wouldn't do. So it's the other one of the Chris. Who am I thinking of? Chris Evans, Captain America. The Aussies, who would they choose? Hugh Jackman? Not sure. I do like Hugh, but there's something pretty light there, isn't there? But you know, he's a big guy. He could bring that Wolverine physique and that you know, his general affability. But it wouldn't be Jeffrey Rush because he's disgraced. It wouldn't be Mel Gibson. Of course, the obvious choice, Kate Blanchett. I think she'd wipe the floor with the opposition. Daniel Day-Lewis, of course, was another choice for Ireland. Like I think he's on record as saying, you know, England is his home, or he thinks of England as home. But he has dual citizenship. He's an Irish citizen as well as a British citizen, and he has. I don't know if he still has. I think he still has a home in Wicklow, not that far from where I live. I shared a I shared a sauna with Daniel Day-Lewis years ago, and I just felt I had to respect the code of the sauna, which in my opinion requires no talking and solitary introspection in the heat. So I didn't bother to reach out and go, I think you're an absolute legend. I love you. I too am an actor. But yeah. Anyway, listen. To come back to good old Tom, little Tommy, who was he a Franciscan seminarian at one point in his teen years. See, this is another part of the Tom Cruise package, is that he has something like pathological zeal for winning. And the game he wanted to win was acting. The game he wanted to win was Hollywood. And he has won it. But he is, yeah, like he's I don't know if he's still deep in Scientology or not, but this has been part of the Tom Cruise mystique all along. I mean, Rob Lowe has an autobiography, and he wrote very amusingly about Tom Cruise just being so sort of amped and jacked up for the outsiders that he was just constantly challenging people to, I don't know if it was like arm wrestles. Arm wrestles are push-up competitions, but just bringing that, you know, intense competitiveness and electric, unstoppable energy to everything he was doing. And you know, for me, if the one movie that I think, if you want to catch the early Tom Cruise thing before he became Tom Cruise, the movie to watch is 1981's Taps, about a military school full of aspiring officers, young men training to be military officers. So kind of like an exclusive military boarding school run by George C. Scott's senior man in command. And there's a crisis at the school, and suddenly the school is under siege after some tensions between the local townies and the army cadets. And again, C. Thomas Howell is in it, Sean Penn is in it. They're kind of the main two guys who we're going on the journey with. But Tom Cruise is there. And he is just operating on a whole other level of commitment. every single thing he does, you can't take your eyes off him. And, you know, in a way, the character and the story and the setting kind of gave him a vessel or a scaffolding that he could really attach his particular talent to. And there was something, I think, about, well, here's a mode of behavior, or here's an environment where I have permission to fully, pour every ounce of my energy into being this thing, which is the fanatic, the absolute fanatic in service of something intensely righteous. And it's like each ingredient just ramps up the temperature. And he is not a central character, although he plays a very important role in the unfolding of the plot. But every time he comes on screen, and how he's executing his moves and his orders and his etiquette, you're just like, holy hell. No other actor in this movie is doing what he's doing. And I think that is the signature quality of Cruise. And then, as his movies went on and he leaned into the kind of Cruise charm machine and the Cruise smile, I think he kind of just switched into automatic pilot to a certain extent. And there were roles that just simply weren't that interesting. And I mean, I remember as a young guy watching Cocktail, for example. I can't even remember the plot of that, but he's a barman, top barman, being trained in by Brian Brown. I don't think Brian Brown's big enough to represent Australia in the Aussie, in the acting Olympics. But I just remember thinking, now going, this is really not good. But he did a lot of that stuff, and the roles just felt so generic. But then he could also give you Rain Man, and he could also give you Born on the 4th of July. I mean, they're only, I think, a year apart. Like, they are two great performances. But then a year later, he can give you Days of Thunder. Again, like one I haven't watched for a very long time. But just the formula, the recipe, the template, the vehicle. And in that case, literally, because he was racing cars, kind of NASCAR rally style cars. But he like that. I think that just became the momentum. That became the career. But it's interesting because for me, if you look at Tom Cruise's career and you had to, make some. Okay, well, let me make it easy for you. Let me make it an either or, and then we can kind of, we can cheat after this. But off the top of your head, like if you're somebody who likes movies and likes Tom Cruise, off the top of your head, if I said you can have the first half of his career or the second half of his career, what would you choose? Yeah, I'm giving you a moment to think about that. My instinct when I asked myself the question was first half of the career. And when I went and checked, I was amused to see that if, and this is, I'm being a little bit cheeky because he had a few appearances before 1983, but 1983 was definitely his breakout year. And 2022 was Top Gun Maverick. 2023 was the last Mission Impossible movie, which I can tell you now I don't rate at all. I thought it was just dead on arrival. Everything about the performances were dead. Action sequences, grand, whatever. But just such an uninteresting movie. Look, more on that anon. But 2003 was when Tom Cruise made, I don't know if it was filmed, but it came out in 2003, The Last Samurai, directed by Edward Zwick, who, didn't he also do Glory? And I'm trying to think what the other Edward Zwick movie was. I can't think at the moment. Anyway, The Last Samurai. So basically Tom Cruise is, I think it's set in the 1800s, and he's been invited out to Japan to teach the Japanese modern warfare, and he gets caught up in a kind of a cultural war and realizes he's more attracted to traditional Japanese samurai, the kind of samurai code and the warrior code of Japanese martial arts. And then, under the tutelage, I think it must be of Ken Watanabe, he realizes that, he's an excellent samurai himself. And it's a little bit white savior, but it's definitely more Tom Cruise exceptionalism. And of course that is American exceptionalism writ small, although it's writ very large in that movie. And I remember seeing that and going, Jesus, this is really dreadful, and has almost nothing to recommend it. And that, I think, was a key sort of turn in his career. Now, there were other very good movies to come, but not that many of them. Because after that, there were just a lot of really hit and miss and odd choices. But most of his best work had happened before that, and most of his most interesting work had come before that. And probably in that second half of his career, from and including 2003, you might only take 3 or 4 movies. And I'll tell you the ones that I would pick. I know Collateral is one of them. Collateral by Michael Mann, where he played a hitman in a brilliant sort of two-hander with him and Jamie Foxx. That's a great movie. It's a great LA movie. 2 great performances by Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, and brilliantly shot by Michael Mann with some great nifty little set pieces. But after Collateral, he did War of the Worlds. Spielberg, I only watched that once, didn't think much of it. Mission Impossible 3, also a bit, whatever. Lions for Lambs, didn't see it. Tropic Thunder, he has the sort of Harvey Weinstein impression at the end of it, the spoof. Don't know if I'd rate that. Valkyrie, grand. Night and Day, his sort of adventure romp with Cameron Diaz. Again, he looked a bit strange in that. I quite liked Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, so that's Mission Impossible 4. I think Jeremy Renner's in that. That's the is that the Abu Dhabi one? I think it is, in the sandstorm, and I can't think of the name of that building. There's a great sequence in that. I quite enjoyed that. Rock of Ages, didn't see. Jack Reacher, Oblivion, not bad. Oblivion, interestingly, directed by Joseph Kosinski, who did Top Gun Maverick. Sort of a hit and miss movie. Some nice stuff in it, but ultimately not great. Then Edge of Tomorrow, which is a very, very successful movie. That's Doug Liman, isn't it? And Cruise and Emily Blunt. And again, that rare example where he almost has chemistry with his leading lady. But he's very funny in that because he's a coward and he's not a winner. Although ultimately, of course, he becomes a winner. But that's a really good movie with a very entertaining premise. Then another Mission Impossible movie, Rogue Nation. I can't remember if I like that or not. A Jack Reacher sequel, not interested. The Mummy, no thank you. American Made, about Barry Seal, the American who did he fly drugs for the 4 with the blessing of the CIA? I didn't watch it. It just didn't look that good. Mission Impossible Fallout, Oh yeah, that was the one with Henry Cavill. Probably the best use of Henry Cavill to date. He was very funny as an arrogant, a very arrogant American operative who's sort of keeping an eye on Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt. And the first time I thought, oh yeah, Henry Cavill's good. Didn't particularly find him interesting doing anything else. And then Top Gun Maverick. So I think, is that 3 movies? Top Gun Maverick and Edge of Tomorrow and Collateral, and maybe 1 or 2 of the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, I think I'd take that. So that's 4 that I'd go, yeah, they're worth keeping, and the rest, who cares? And that's from the second 20 years of his acting career. And then, if you go to the first 20 years, you get, I think, a lot more. You get a lot more for your buck. So yeah, The Outsiders, even though I wouldn't, it's not really a Tom Cruise movie, I'd take that. Risky Business, All the Right Moves, maybe. Top Gun, of course. The Colour of Money, Scorsese, Paul Newman, sequel to The Hustler. And I remember seeing that in the cinema. That was 1986 as well. So I was 12. I think I went with my dad. And I found Tom Cruise's character so hard to take because he was so cocky. And Paul Newman, I knew who he was. I knew he was very cool. And I was like, God, yeah, he's quite old, isn't he? Now, I don't know how old he was then, Paul Newman. He might have been early 60s. I think he was born in 1925, Paul Newman. But The Colour of Money is a great movie. John Turturro has a great part in that movie as well. Then Cocktail, no thanks. Rain Man, excellent. And as has been discussed by many other people, not just myself, and I've mentioned it myself, the prevailing wisdom nowadays is that Tom Cruise's performance was the more interesting, more agile performance in Rain Man. His journey was the greater of the 2 actors, along with Dustin Hoffman, who won the Oscar that year, portraying the autistic older brother. Born on the 4th of July blew me away when I saw it at 15. And I just thought, wow, Tom Cruise is the real deal. And at that time, I felt he hadn't shown us that's what he was capable of. And then you get into the kind of the generic stuff. Days of Thunder, Far and Away, no thanks. Never could bring myself to watch that. Just the Ibigara Irishness, no, not going there. A Few Good Men, great entertainment. And remind yourself that Tom Cruise is still at this stage playing young characters, the young up and coming, the future. So A Few Good Men, the military litigator, The Firm, another lawyer, and the young guy, the young talent. The Firm, absolutely fine. Probably most memorable for Gene Hackman's brilliant performance in that. And then Interview with the Vampire. I remember enjoying that a lot, seeing it in the cinema and thinking, yep, this is good. Tom Cruise can do this kind of stuff as well. The first Mission Impossible movie, a bit of De Palma gore and nastiness, quite interesting for that. Jerry Maguire, if you listened to my episode last year, love Jerry Maguire. Definitely one of the top 5 Tom Cruise movies. Into Eyes Wide Shut. Again, like Tom Cruise is only like in his mid-30s doing Eyes Wide Shut. Strange movie. I rewatched it not that long ago. I spoke about that last year. And then brilliant in Magnolia in 1999 for Paul Thomas Anderson. Not playing a winner. And now he wasn't playing a winner in Eyes Wide Shut either, nor in Jerry Maguire. So this is like, these are interesting roles. And he's kind of, playing, with his persona, playing with the expectation of his audience. Magnolia is quite a nasty, traumatized piece of work, and a kind of an early version of an early version of dubious male advocacy and kind of men going their own way, weaponizing, misogyny and male insecurity, but he does it so bloody well, and has a great deathbed scene with Jason Robards in that. Very, very moving. And then Vanilla Sky. I mean, Vanilla Sky it's cute, and maybe worth looking at just for the sort of the music references and the cuteness of the idea. A remake of a Spanish movie, of course. And then you get Minority Report, 2002, which I think is excellent. I really, really like that movie. So, I mean, that's the first 20 years, really, to 2002. I think a lot more keepers in there. It's a much more diverse raft of performances. But over the last 20 years, it's become clear that he just has decided to lean into the action mode and the action persona, and has kind of taken it upon himself to save movies and save Hollywood. But that last Mission Impossible movie was so inert for an action movie. Now, there were action sequences, but if we're meant to be motivated to get behind the Mission Impossible team, as made up of Tom Cruise, Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg, they all looked so bored, and just not interesting and not interested at all. But every line reading was so incredibly self-serious and loaded with foreboding. It just isn't good. And then the idea that there are kind of two love interests in the movie, that Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt is meant to be kind of torn between, one played by Rebecca Ferguson and one played by Hayley Atwell. I mean, both actresses acquit themselves, perfectly well, in the context of the movie. But again, we're meant to think, oh my God, this is Ethan Hunt really has a problem here. No, sorry. Just no. Put it away, lads. It's not working. But Top Gun Maverick from the previous year, released the previous year, was a great success. And I don't know how, like if you're watching it as someone who was very familiar with Top Gun, from kind of 30 years earlier, you have a different relationship to it, because there's a nostalgia that comes with it, and that the movie didn't shy away from, that it embraced, and basically plays many of the same notes from Top Gun. But it's a better movie, because it's not, like, in terms of what they were able to execute from a filming point of view, and from the flight sequences, like, really extraordinarily entertaining, and just striking a more palatable balance in terms of the amount of cheese that they brought into it. I heard a lot of people raving about Jennifer Connelly. Jennifer Connelly's a great actress, I think. But the idea that she and Tom Cruise have some amazing chemistry is, I'm sorry. Once again, you're looking at Tom Cruise and kind of going, he's not human. He doesn't know how to relate to other human beings with real human emotions. And he continues to be really sexless. In fact, maybe the most convincing he's been as someone with real human, tangible, below the waist sexual energy is maybe as his character in Magnolia. where, yeah, he's pretty, he's just a great character. I'm not repelled by him. It's great entertainment. I don't share those values. But he's a character, and he plays that role really well. And particularly in his in that movie when his character is interviewed by April Grace, and she's just pushing and makes him, just makes him so uncomfortable. No, it's really, really good, and he's just glowering at her, and he just says, I'm judging you, and he just wants to kill her. You can see it's good stuff. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is, Tom Cruise is is one of a kind, and a lot of people like the automatic stuff. He's kind of extraordinary, and he's extraordinary also in terms of the physical condition he's in, and how he's kind of preserved something of his youthful self, because very few actors from his generation have managed to do that. Now I don't know if he's had work done on his face, cosmetic surgery or whatever. He can look quite strange, and I felt in that movie Night and Day, the one with Cameron Diaz, I think that was in evidence there. His face just started to look a little bit rubbery or plasticky or something. Look, that's his right. He can do what he bloody wants, but he's a strange one, Tom Cruise, and I'd love to see him just move away from the action stuff, move away from the Mission Impossible stuff. Well, I think maybe the next movie's meant to be the last one in that franchise anyway, and just go back to playing more interesting roles and playing maybe, I don't know, normal human beings. I'm not sure if he's capable, but that would be a really interesting next act in his career, because it would be nice to start, ticking off movies and going, yeah, that's worth seeing, that's worth keeping in the Cruise filmography. But I don't know if he's going to do that. And the part of this discussion is, does an American audience or does an international audience want to see him deviate and move away from the sort of the prototype? Do they want to see him step away from that version of Tom Cruise, which they believe is a reflection of themselves? Do they want to see Tom Cruise not be a winner? I don't know. I'd like to see him not be a winner. I think he does his most interesting work when he is intensely compromised, and having to negotiate his frailty. But that said, I did enjoy Top Gun Maverick. What can I tell you? I'm a child of the 80s as well, and I make no apologies for it. Okay, I'm gonna go and get my hair cut like Pete Mitchell, Maverick, short and a little bit spiky, but red, not dyed jet black like his in Top Gun Maverick. Tom Cruise, one of a kind, a phenomenon really, and yeah, it hasn't been hit after hit after hit, but he remains central to the mainstream, like central and vital to the mainstream American movie experience. And there's very few actors you can say that about. I mean, and like there's another discussion to be had about the actors who occupy these kind of very special representative places in movies. And in American movies, people like, if you want to go back, actors like James Stewart, obviously, maybe actors like Gary Cooper, maybe actors like Spencer Tracy. I mean, John Wayne epitomized something at a certain point as well. It's interesting to see the kind of longevity of the career and the esteem in which these actors are held and what they seem to represent. And I think actors have been, male actors have been afforded that status more readily and for longer than female actors, than actresses. And probably the other actor of today's age that occupies that special place and is probably more like those actors of old would be someone like Tom Hanks. But when you look through his filmography, the depth of quality isn't actually that impressive. Now, it depends what you like, but look, that would have to be a whole other episode. Maybe it would be like, a Tom versus Tom. But not today. I've got to go. I'm going to go get my hair cut. Okay, thanks for listening. And I will be back next week with something else. And, I don't know if there's anything in this episode that could be spun into wellness content. It's been very much exclusively movies. But I don't know. It depends on your relationship to movies and to Tom Cruise. Maybe this has been an hour of nostalgia, or just an opportunity to agree or disagree with my assessment of his career, what he offers. That Tom Cruise-ness. No one else has it, just him. Okay, I'm gone. Thanks for listening. Mind yourselves. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.